My name is Steve Landers. I know most of you here. It's great to meet Skelter for the first time. I meet many of you at the various conferences, and it's my privilege to be here to share some of what I've been doing. It's not directly related to Tcl in one sense, and yet in another it is, because we all have to deal with project management, don't we? I do want to put a caveat on there. These are my opinions. Your mileage might vary. I suspect it will. Anyway, here's my opinions about project management. It's very hard. And after doing software development for way too long, well over 35 years, I've come to the conclusion that no, one size doesn't fit everybody. And that's the reason why there's so many different software management packages out there. And the problem I've found is that over the years, no matter which package you adopt or which system, you end up spending too much time feeding and caring for that system. And the means of your productivity suddenly becomes the end. And it gets worse if you're in a large company, but at least they have the resources to employ people to be software project managers. When you're in smaller projects and open source projects, you don't have anyone dedicated to that. It's also my view that less is more when it comes to project management. To use a saying, sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. Why do I use fossil tickets? When I started looking into this, I looked at various open source alternatives. Many were at best quite clunky, primitive. You had to set up and configure your own servers, and I didn't want to do that for this particular. And most of them were too complicated. They started off simple, and featureitis came in. There are hosted alternatives, but again, if you're going to put your key resources onto a third-party hosted service, there's some considerations there. Some of them felt like filling out tax forms. You had to put so much information into them. And the other reason why we went with Fossil was the integration with the version control system. Right. And it doesn't have to be online all the time. The hosted solutions were online all the time. I spent too much time on aircraft. So Fossil tickets, the good. All the reasons those of us who use Fossil like it. It's distributed, integrated and flexible. The bad, there is lack of process embodied in the Fossil tickets. It's just a storage. You put them in, you can have a look at them. And the ugly was there's no styling on the interface. And surprisingly, you thought I was going to put your name there, didn't you, Richard? Surprisingly, our designers, there's a group of us who work in a company called Keepsake, a lot of ticklers in there, but our designers, who probably will never see this talk, thought the interface was ugly. Okay, Kanban is a technique developed at Toyota in the 1950s for visual planning. It's basically just a visual notice board. But it's incredibly simple and incredibly effective, and I'll show you in a moment. The idea is continuous delivery. You can see what you need to do next, you keep doing it, you hand it on. Pardon me. Lately, it's been adopted by a lot of advocates of agile programming. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear a new buzzword like agile or whatever, I run screaming. It's like the person who says, we're into innovation. Today, we're going to innovate. Right. So I sort of ran screaming for this, and then Steve Redler, whom many of you know, said to me, no, there's something in this, you need to look at this. So when I looked into it, yeah, it is actually a good way of doing things. A little bit of nomenclature, then I'll show you some screens. The nomenclature I use in project management, I've got things called projects across the organization, across multiple organizations. Within those there are tasks, they're the things that make the project happen. And then there are activities. Activities are the things that make tasks happen. And so the top two I wanted to store in a database. The bottom one is just like a to-do list. And so each of us that use these techniques, we use our own favorite to-do list manager. In my case, it's on the phone. So we're focusing on those top two. The Tcl Kanban, essentially, whenever there's a change to a ticket in Fossil, it regenerates a HTML file, JavaScript CSS3, which displays the Kanban board for the particular person. And it uses Twitter Bootstrap, jQuery, and so forth. All right, let me show you why this is a good thing. This is a rather recent ticket list from Fossil. Is that the one you were working on this morning, Richard?
No, I haven't entered that one yet.
Oh, okay. So this is for SQLite. And as you can see, it's a linear table of reports. This is one of my Kanban boards. Now what I did here was took the one from our business and I used a jargon generator, a corporate jargon generator, to change the text so you didn't see our internal stuff. I love it. Look, assertively evolve accurate intermediaries for interdependent technologies. Does that make sense to anyone? So here's what a Kanban board looks like. You've got a planned column. That's where you put the tasks that you've evaluated and you're going to do them. You've ignore blocked. You've got a current column. They're the things that I'm working on. Which one of you is texting me? And you've also got a testing column. So once you've done the work, now we're testing and they get flipped over here. Tickets tend to move across that way. Blocked just means I can't do this because there's something else that needs to be done first. There's also two other categories. Unscheduled, I don't really need to see that when I'm not doing my planning, and there's also completed. I don't really need to see that on a day-to-day basis. So this is where I need to focus. I need to be aware of what's in here, and this is stuff I've passed on to somebody else. So how did I make this happen with Fossil? Essentially there were just some cosmetic changes. The Fossil ticketing system is incredibly flexible. It's built on top of SQL. You've got templates for HTML that you can modify. So I built it on top of that. The main one to notice here is that there's a TH1 hook. That's just a little bit of ticklish code you can call every time a ticket changes, and that then regenerates the board. The schema itself was pretty much unchanged. The stuff in red is stuff that I don't use, but I left it in there, and I just added 4 fields. Who created the ticket, who it's assigned to, the effort involved, and whether it's blocked. And blocked is just a list of ticket numbers. This effort thing, I'll come back to that, but what I'm trying to do when I'm putting tickets in is to minimize the number of choices that you have to make, and where you have to make a choice, minimize the number of options. So for example, this is straight out of the Fossil ticket configuration, but there's some per project settings you might want to put in there. What my subsystem is what I use for projects. So here's my projects: app dev, marketing server, website, whatever. Then for the who created it, some people. So that's sort of per project stuff. Now we start to get into the overall Kanban settings. The choices of the type. Now I don't have multiple choices there. Either something is something that needs to be done, or it's a problem report, in which case I want it to stand out. But rather than have whole lists of different types of choices, code defect, bug report or whatever, take those all out, because the chances are the person putting the report in is not going to go through them in detail. It's just something that needs to be done. Same for priority. Everything is normal, except for things that are not. So I don't reprioritize tasks. If I put in there high, medium, low, severe, I've got to maintain that information, and generally I don't have time to maintain that information. So I put everything in as normal, then I have high priority for things that I want to stand out, and low priority for things I want to remember, but I don't want to be reminded of, if you see what I mean. And then this is efforts in there purely so when I'm going through these things I can say, right, I've got half a day spare, I've looked at this already, I think it's going to take hours to implement, I'll grab that off, make it current and do it now. And then, got to stop rotating my phone. When I come to the status choices, you've seen the planned, current and testing. Unscheduled is there, but it's not on the Kanban board, and completed and archived. So once something's through testing, mark it as completed, then when you go through the next development phase, just mark it as archived. So it's history, you don't need to look at it unless you want to. And that's basically it. There's some HTML pages in Fossil for maintaining this stuff. It's all stored in the SQLite database. You edit it through the web interface. So I changed those to match the changes in the schemas, but that's not, I did that the other night. Again, yesterday on the train I did some more changes. So it's not a lot of work. And then at the moment you have to have the Tcl interface turned on because the Kanban script is separate. Richard and I are talking about how we might want to get that into Fossil, so you don't need a separate binary. And then this is just TH1, does a Tcl invoke, missing an L, auto-corrected. And you pass the name of the person. So it will trigger a rebuild of the Kanban board on a per user basis. You could do it on a per project if you wanted to. Then we got to the issue of how do we share the board, because Fossil's distributed, and I thought, right, I'm going to just rsync this off to a server and refer to it. But then I thought, thinking about it, I thought, well, no, actually, what I'm going to do is use Fossil to distribute it for me, because Fossil distributes text rather well. So there's a feature you may not know about in Fossil called the project documentation, but you can actually refer to a file in a branch via a URL with doc on the front. So I create a branch called status, where I check these things into. Then the status branch is hidden from the timeline, don't want to see that all the time. And I can refer to it from the Fossil user interface just using a URL like that. So that's my name, and my login on Fossil is Steve L, but that's the name of the board I use. And as soon as the last step in that Kanban script, that Kanban.tcl script, is to do a Fossil commit of the HTML file. All right, let's see if this works. No, that didn't work. I've got to do this one down here. That didn't work either. I'll do it this way. This is easier. So there's a... Hello. It did work, but on a different monitor. This is going to be interesting. Excuse me. So there's the Kanban board. I'll just bring those sizes up so you can see them a bit easier. There we go. So I mentioned the high priority before. All that happens if you mark something as high is that it just puts a little icon next to it, so it stands out. That's all we care about. The columns, I can't at the moment, but I will be able to just drag that across and that'll make it current. The blocked, if it's blocked by something that's one of mine, it draws a line to the particular ticket, so I can see which one it is. If it's blocked by somebody else, it's just got a link and that brings up their board. It really is simple stuff. So what I'm talking about today is nothing radical, nothing clever. It's about reducing the choices and presenting it in a simple graphical format. But it seems to be incredibly effective as a way to manage small teams of small projects. Yeah, so that's it on that side. Let's go back to the presentation and see what happened. Any questions while I've got it up there?
These are tasks, right?
These are tasks, yeah.
Can you manage multiple projects in one Fossil?
Yeah, we do. In fact, that's the app project, that's the server project. I'm going across projects here. The assumption is that it's across organizations, potentially, if it was multiple organizations doing it. It's all within the one repository. That's the only constraint. But you could make a repository just for holding your tickets and never put source code in there. The fact is that because it is all in the repository with your source code, you can actually refer to check-ins and you can refer to wiki pages and all the rest of it just by putting the text in there. The other thing here is, if I wanted to edit this one, for example, I just click on that and you can see here that it's much more simplified from the standard Fossil pages, but this is the ugly. This needs CSS, because we all know CSS makes life better. And you can see just the history of comments that have been added. And then if I want to edit this, I click edit. I won't, because I broke it on the train yesterday. But basically that allows me to, if I wanted to change the priority of this thing away from high priority, I could just go and do it down to normal again.
Those were some great tasks, by the way.
I was so impressed. It's a website called Corporate Ipsum, and all I did is wrote a Tcl script that took the tickets from our organisation and changed the text so that I didn't have time to re-enter all these tickets. But you know, some of this stuff in here I could actually do. I could objectively maximise back-end platforms by unique applications. Anyway.
Why is it blocked?
Because the ticket that I changed was blocked, not because of the text there. The other thing is this is all Java, jQuery, CSS3, so you know you've got all those sort of goodies there. These ones go way down to some other tickets down the bottom. It's blocked on. Why is it blocked? Because competently leverage others' flexible imperatives without interactive intellectual capital hasn't been done. Nor have I uniquely formulated intuitive quality vectors. Now, let me have a look at my other notes about what I might do subsequent to this, because I'll leave that up there and you can keep reading those. I know none of you are listening to me at this point. Right. They're a grey colour. And if something is a low priority, by convention, I tend not to put it on my list of planned. So if I come up to here, tasks menu, so this is just the fossil tasks, I keep unscheduled and completed off to one side because they don't appear on the Kanban board. But I just shove them in there as a placeholder so I won't forget them. And the way it kind of works is that I might look at them all once a month just to make sure the unscheduled are going to stay unscheduled. Once a week, I will tend to look at all the planned and just essentially make sure the stuff that's planned is nothing's forgotten. And then ongoing, as I finish a task, I try and keep this list here rather short, my current stuff. That's my focus. So when I finish one here, I go back over here and have a look at what needs to be done. And because I'm reviewing them all the time, I know we all know roughly what work we've got in front of us. We don't need a ticket system to tell us this is high, medium, low, whatever. So in my case, I will be reviewing these almost daily, at least daily as I finish stuff over here. And then I bump it across here. And for me, this column here basically means I've handed it on to the QA people. When the QA people are happy with it, then they'll mark it as completed. But at least I'll not lose sight of the fact that I've done something, handed it off, and it's still on my planning horizon. So they can push it back, yes. That's the other thing. You change the name in this. At the moment, these are still on my board because I haven't changed the name on them because I was actually doing some testing on a lot of things. But if I hand it off to their Kanban board, it disappears off my board. And if they hand it back to me, then it comes back onto my board. Now, the really cool thing is with the notifications, which is kind of where I was heading to with this. We use Slack. I presume you're all familiar with Slack, but it's basically a WebSocket-based chat facility that you can push email, messages, text, everything. It's well worth looking at if you've got small teams or even large teams. So I wrote a generalized Slack interface in Tcl, which I'm happy to share with anybody that wants it. And you can push to a person or a channel in Slack. So I've put a bunch of rules around that in Fossil. So if a ticket is assigned to me by somebody else, I get a notification in my own personal Slack channel. If a ticket is, and vice versa, if I push a ticket to someone else, if a ticket changes to current, it goes into our group status or planning channel. So everybody knows that I'm working on this now. If a ticket gets marked as testing, it's also pushed into the planning channel. But we don't get notifications when something is pushed to completed because we don't need to do anything. It's completed, and I don't get notifications when a ticket's pushed into unscheduled or planning because I don't need to do anything. So the notifications are only for current and testing, and notifications to everyone are only for current and testing. If a new ticket, if somebody other than myself marks a ticket as scheduled, unscheduled, planned, I get notified. In other words, if somebody hands something to me, I get a notification. But I don't get a notification if I do that myself, on the basis that you'd think I would know. That's not necessarily true. All right, where to now? And then some questions. Because this is checking 25 to 30K or whatever of jQuery, JavaScript, HTML in each time, in my repository there's 1,300 check-ins in the status branch, for example. So I would really like a fossil replace facility. Wouldn't I, Richard?
I would call that files that are synced but not versioned.
Exactly, because I can regenerate these anytime from the ticket system if I ever needed to go back forensically.
Other people have requested this, for example, to store binaries of their latest release in the fossil
Right.
repository itself so that it's synced and you don't have to keep them in a separate page.
So fossil replace is definitely on our radar. We'll call it the Eindhoven update, shall we, Richard? But what that buys me is I can now go to a self-contained. I can move the script into fossil, the Kanban.Tcl script into fossil, which is nice because I don't then have to put it onto all the users' machines. Fossil can I can just source it out of a fossil page, out of a blob. I want to move to a smaller JS library than jQuery. I use jQuery just because it was there, but there's some quite nice, quite lean JS libraries. And once I do that, I'll move the JavaScript into the repository too. At the moment, it brings it in from Google's CDN, and of course that means it don't work on a plane. So push that into the repository, and Richard and I have talked about ways that we might even be able to get fossil itself to do the generation rather than have a Tcl script, and that way it's self-contained. The other thing I want to do is improve the UI. So at the moment you don't see unscheduled or completed. I'd like to be able to shift left and right or do something like that. So if I want to, I can, an arrow left and it'll show me it, and arrow right to see the completed. Drag and drop is in there, so I can actually drag and drop between columns. I just got to figure out how to do the authentication, so that can just call the fossil ticket edit URL to just change the relevant fields. I mean, it's no problem going in and changing a form, but it would be nicer to drag and drop. And I'll put some time into, I plan to put some time into styling those screens so that people who care about such things don't get offended. And really part of doing the talk today is to say, well, look, this works for me and for my team, but is this the sort of thing that you might be interested in? And if it is, I might invest some more time into generalising it. And I really love feedback, either here or over coffee or beer. Thank you very much. That's all I've got. Questions?
I may have missed it, but was there a facility for noting deadlines on tasks or projects?
I haven't turned that on, but it'd just be another column if you need it. There's a quote in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy which goes, "I love deadlines, especially the whooshing noise they make as they fly past." One reason I don't put deadlines and that sort of stuff in here is because, one, you never meet them. Okay, first thing. Two, they have to be maintained. That's right, 6 to 8. That's what somebody said, how long will it take? 6 to 8. And then I come back and say, 6 to 8 what? And I said, haven't decided yet. You could put that in if you care about it. The other thing is that I tend to put the bigger deadlines, the targets, conference, we have to have the software out by the second week in June, that sort of thing. I don't put them in here. I put them in the fossil wiki on the homepage of the wiki, which I make the homepage on the repository. So anytime you go into the repository, it's in your face. You're being reminded of it. The big issue with putting this sort of thing in the database, somebody has to maintain it. And my experience is no one does.
I thought that might be the answer, by the way.
Yeah, I know. You know me too well.
This lack of deadlines was probably a feature.
It is, yeah, it is, because, like I say, you make the deadlines big and, anyway, yeah. But if you care about those things, it's just another line in the fossil create table. and it's just another entry in the form. So you can continually add stuff you want to store. And then where it generates them in, you could actually put, when I've got the app down the bottom, you could put $deadline or whatever and put it in bold if there's no other deadlines. You know, you could graph that in very easily if you cared about it.
It could be convenient to sort the columns by deadline. They're not, how are they currently sorted?
They're currently sorted by the order they were put in. Yes, it could be convenient to sort them by deadline if I had the time to maintain deadlines. That's and then you've got to put them in some sort of pro rata. Any other questions? Oh, we've got two. Go for it. Yeah.
I'm not familiar enough with the fossil ticketing system, but the fact that you can have one ticket blocked on another ticket, is that inherent in fossil? Or did you
No.
have that for this board?
I just added a new column called blocked, and then I just put the ticket IDs in the blocked as a list, comma or space separated, and the script that generates it just busts that apart and generates the references. So it's a virtual column. So each of those tickets will have its own status of planned, unplanned, whatever. And you could put stuff in there like, I'm blocked on an unscheduled task, alert me. But again, it's just the business rules that are in that script that generates it.
It's basically one script that handles it.
Yeah, it's about 100 lines of tick. I can show you later. I'm almost embarrassed by it because it's got JavaScript all through it and in the middle of Tcl, which is never a good thing. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
So you now have a page for each developer. I was also curious, like, have you have a page for every project? So you
Yes.
can see, like, every project, these things have to be done, this is that.
Yeah, it's in the code per project, but I turned it off because we weren't using it. But I think it's a valid thing, an interesting thing. In this particular business, it's very much focused on the person, and so I didn't turn it on. But yes, that would be my. I would think if I generalise this, then there would need to be a way of doing that as well. And I'd perhaps.
More easily, I guess, to get the deadline, so you know actually which blocks have to be.
You heard my comments before. I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just not a niche I have to scratch. And look, we all know that like I said, one size fits nobody. But if this can be generalised and using TCL scripts, then you make it work for you.
Steve, I think I could run my whole life with this. It's
That's
definitely interesting.
that's concerning. But I think the amazing thing is not what I've done, and not that you could run your life, but the Japanese have been doing this, making cars since 1950, just-in-time manufacturing, and the software industry really didn't start till 25 years later. You know, the sort of commodity software industry. So we're slow learners. Any other questions? Well, I'll hand it back to Paul. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.